How many questions? How long was Afghanistan part of India? That's question number one. How long was Tibet independent? Question number two. Prior to Islam, what was the culture like in these regions? That's question number three. And question four is, how do you distinguish a major difference between Persia and India prior to Islam? Okay, let's begin with the first question. How long was Afghanistan part of India? Afghanistan was always part of India from the beginning of the human occupation of the Indian subcontinent until about 500 years ago. Right? So the people of Afghanistan and India are the same. I'm talking about the Pashtuns. The Pashtuns are uh, essentially uh, an outgrowth of the overall northern Indian and western Indian population. Genetically, culturally, etc., linguistically, they are part of the Indian ethnic continuum. Religiously and culturally, now it has changed a lot, but there are still these layers below the surface of culture and all that, which are still very much Indian. They will not agree to what I'm saying. They will say, no, we're not Indians. Fine, that's your choice. That's fine. But facts are facts. Facts don't care about anyone's feelings. So Afghanistan was part of India from the beginning of time, beginning of human history, or beginning of the history of the Indian subcontinent, until about the Turkic invasions of India, when Afghanistan was forcibly Islamized. The Buddhist Hindu culture was wiped out, smashed, destroyed, cultural genocide, demic genocide, uh, and so on. Kandahar essentially was the city of the Rajputs. Do you know that? The Pashtuns and the Rajputs are essentially the same people. Of course, now things have changed, like I said. And today in Afghanistan, you have these different ethnicities: the Uzbeks, the Tajiks, the Turkmens, and the Hazaras, and all that. These are ethnicities that came in from outside as a consequence of the of the Turkic invasions of India. So around 500 years or so ago, the region kind of started seeing itself as a separate political, or rather cultural, ethno-cultural entity. But until 500 years ago, Indians and Afghans fought together, bled together, died together in resisting the Turks. Because despite the religious difference, we were still the same people. So that is about Afghanistan. Question two is, how long was Tibet independent? Well, if you look at the history of Tibet, it's about, I would say, around 2000 years old or so, when it emerged as a separate ethno-cultural entity. So Tibet was always independent. The independence ended in 1955 when the Chinese Communist Party invaded, and India under Shri Jawaharlal Nehru aided the Chinese Communist Party by sending them supplies of rice and other foodstuffs so that they were able to survive. And that's why the Chinese were able to occupy Tibet. Before that, the Chinese Communist Party's rationale for invading Tibet is that Tibet was part of the Chinese Yuan dynasty's territory. So that is what they say. They say that the Chinese Yuan dynasty had conquered Tibet, and that's why Tibet should be part of China. That is the logic. Now, here's the truth. The Yuan dynasty was a Mongol dynasty. Its founder was Shri Chinggis Khan. So Shri Chinggis Khan invaded and smashed China to bits, right? His son Ogadai Khan continued the process further, and he subjugated the entirety of China. And Shri Ogadai Khan's son, Shri Kublai Khan, was the first Yuan emperor of China. And retrospectively, he said that his grandfather, Shri Chinggis Khan, was the first emperor of the Yuan dynasty. So this was a Mongol dynasty. Neither Chinggis Khan, nor Ogadai Khan, nor Kublai Khan, nor any of their descendants were Chinese. They were Mongols. And therefore, this was a Mongol dynasty. It was not a Chinese dynasty. It was a conquest dynasty of China. Its capital was Beijing because Shri Kublai Khan decided that he will sit in Beijing and lord over China. Now, here's the relationship between the Yuan dynasty and Tibet. The Yuan dynasty decided to accept Tibet as its protectorate. See, the relationship between Tibet and the Mongols was that of Guru and Shishya. teacher and student, guru and shishya. The Tibetans were the gurus, the Mongols were the shishyas. The Tibetans taught, they served as priests and teachers of the Mongols when it came to Indian culture, Vajrayana Buddhism, and all that. So the Mongols, they adopted Tibetan Buddhism, the Tibetan flavor of Buddhism, as their official de facto state religion and culture. And they employed Tibetan monks, sadhus, priests, etc., as their teachers, as their gurus, as their priests. And in return, they said that we will extend our protection to Tibet. We will ensure that Tibet is not does not come under any kind of threat. So they accepted. They took Tibet as a protectorate. They never sent their troops into Tibet. They never conquered Tibet. When Sri Chinggis Khan conquered Karakhitai, which is to the north of Jammu and Kashmir, and when he conquered the Khwarazm Empire, which is to the northwest of Jammu and Kashmir, he went through Tibet on his expedition. And while coming back to China, he again passed through Tibet. He did not ever try to invade, conquer Tibet. He just passed through it. So it tells you that there was no question of a conquest of Tibet. So Tibet was always independent. It was a protectorate of the Yuan dynasty, which was a non-Chinese dynasty. But the Chinese now say that it was a Chinese dynasty because its capital was Beijing, and that's why they consider Tibet to be a part of China, and that justifies their invasion and occupation of Tibet. So Tibet ceased to be independent in 1955 only. Before that, it was always independent. In the 8th century, they actually conquered China and sacked the then capital of China, which was not Beijing at the time. I forget which city it was. You can look it up. Right? So the Tibetans actually conquered China in the 8th century. That they were a powerful military force at the time. Then they became more civilized. They went the way of India later on. And as a result, we can see what happened. So that's the story of Tibet. Prior to Islam, what was the culture like in these regions? Tibet was never Islamic. It is still not Islamic. So it's been the same. It's been a Buddhist culture. They also have their indigenous Bon religion, which is very similar to Hinduism and Buddhism. Right, so it's today they practice a syncretic form of Hinduism, Buddhism, Bon, etc. Hinduism, Buddhism is essentially the same thing, like I have said many times. So that's their culture. Afghanistan, the culture was for thousands of years what we call Hinduism. Later, it became a different flavor of Hinduism, which is Buddhism. The Ghori dynasty was a Buddhist dynasty. Then it became Turkey-sized. It came under the influence of the Turkic invasions. It got converted to Islam, and then that's when the conversion of Afghanistan to Islam began. Then you had the influx of various other ethnic groups into Afghanistan, and today you have this mixed bag in Afghanistan, where the majority ethnic group is the Pashtuns, who are the true natives of Afghanistan, of Gandhar, and you have other ethnicities as well. The Uzbeks, the Tajiks, the Kyrgyz, the Hazaras, the Turkmens, and whatnot. So the culture in Afghanistan was Indian culture. Because when Xuanzang, the great Chinese monk, came to India, the moment he reached Bamiyan, the Bamiyan Valley, he said, "Thank God I have finally reached India." So it tells you Afghanistan was India. Okay, next question is, how do you distinguish a major difference between Persia and India prior to Islam? Prior to Islam, Persia and India were like cousins. I have spoken about this in previous episodes. The Persians were the descendants of the Parshva clan of the Rigvedic Indians. There was this battle of 10 kings. I know you guys have asked me many times. I'll make a detailed analysis of the battle of 10 kings in a separate video. So in the battle of 10 kings, one of the clans that was expelled out of India was the Parshva clan. So these guys went westwards and they settled in the region which is now named after them. The Parshva people settled in a region which came to be known as Persia. So it is named after this clan, the Parshva clan, right? So these were Rigvedic people. They practiced Rigvedic culture and religion. Later on, this new religion emerged, Zoroastrianism, which emerged about 3,500 years ago or so. Its origins are still shrouded in obscurity. We don't know exactly when this individual Shri Zoroaster lived. His name was Zarathustra, yellow camel or golden camel. That's what it means in Sanskrit. Zarathustra, yellow camel. So Zarathustra died in the city of Balkh in Afghanistan. He uh, was the first prophet of a revealed religion, Zoroastrianism. So Zoroastrianism was essentially a kind of inversion of Hinduism. Devas became kind of evil, asuras became kind of good, that sort of thing, a sort of inversion. It was still a polytheistic religion. It was not a monotheistic religion. This is an enormous misconception that people have, that Zoroastrianism is a monotheistic religion. That is utter nonsense. It was a polytheistic religion. It was very much a post-Vedic religion. Much of the ritualism and all was still retained in Zoroastrianism. The yagnas became yasnas, and so on and so forth. The Soma ritual still continued. Vritrahan became Vritrahan is Indra. He became considered to be kind of evil there. The destruction of the evil serpent Vritra is also reflected in Persian mythology and all that. So it is much the same even in Zoroastrianism. So, and the language, the old Persian language, was kind of a dialect, an upper branch dialect of Sanskrit. The vocabulary and grammar was exactly the same. The pronunciations were slightly different. And later on, as time evolved and as time went by, things slightly diverged. But Indians and Persians were still very much neighbors, very much brothers, or at least cousins, until the Arabic invasion of Persia, in which happened like ridiculously fast. In a couple of decades, the entire religion and culture of Persia had changed. The same could not happen in India. So that's the difference between India and Persia prior to the advent of Islam in Persia.